You're listening to Dark Rain Chronicles. The rain hides many things, but it also remembers. Secrets washed away, voices swallowed by the storm. These are the stories it brings back, and tonight, you will hear them. My fingers jitter, a tremor I can't quell, tracing the contours of light on the camera's small, cold screen. 20 minutes I've sat cocooned in my car's stillness, driveway gravel crunching faintly under the tires earlier, now silent. Home waits just beyond the windshield, but crossing the threshold feels impossible. The screen's spectral luminescence paints my face, slick with a sweat born not of heat, but of something else, something dredged from the marrow. I must anchor this, transcribe the dread while it still clings, sharp and undiluted, a souvenir from that husk of a factory. I capture spaces for a living, sterile property showcases mostly, sometimes the stark geometry of architecture. It was Leo, yesterday, who seeded the idea. He knows my penchant for the forsaken, the beauty I find in ruination. That old textile mill, he'd offered, out past the bypass. Prime territory for your brand of industrial melancholy. And so I found it, tethered to the highway by a half-mile artery of cracked asphalt, choked with weeds. 5 o'clock. The sun, low and molten, prepared its daily spectacle. That hallowed golden hour light photographers pursue like prospectors. Before me loomed the factory, a 3-story behemoth of weathered brick, its countless tall windows mostly shattered voids. Ivy crept like grasping fingers up its flanks. The parking lot lay fractured, green pushing defiantly through the blacktop scars. My camera bag, the Canon 5D Mark IV, 3 lenses nestled within, settled onto my shoulder, its familiar heft a small comfort. This ritual, stepping into the forgotten, was well rehearsed. Urban decay photography, a known quantity. The main doors were bound by a rusted chain, impervious. But around the side, a lesser entrance sagged, its hinges groaning a metallic protest as I shouldered it open. My steps cracked against the concrete floor of what seemed a disused loading bay, the sound swallowed by the cavernous space. The air hung thick, viscous with dust, and the slow, sweet perfume of decomposition. Instinct took over. The camera came up. Light streamed oblique and golden, carving long shadows across floors strewn with indeterminate debris, piercing the gloom through fractured panes. Methodically, I moved, chronicling the skeletal remains of machinery, the vibrant insults of graffiti on decaying walls, the patient siege of nature reclaiming its dominion. The second floor housed the heart of the operation. Rows of rust-pocked sewing machines, bolted sentinels on long, scarred tables. Spools of thread, dissolving back into fiber, littered the surfaces. A calendar, stubbornly clinging to a wall, proclaimed it eternally 1989. I documented obsessively, chasing angles, framing decay. Then, the first intrusion, a sharp metallic clang from the floor above. Derelict structures breathe, sigh, shed fragments. Foundations settle, pigeons nest, wind worries loose tin. I knew the litany of benign sounds, yet this felt intentional, weighted, like a dropped tool, perhaps. Silence rushed back in to fill the void. Minutes stretched, dismissing it, the building playing its usual tricks. I returned to my viewfinder. Floor 3 amplified the disquiet. Mostly barren, this level held only ghosts of administration. Overturned desks, gutted filing cabinets. Sunset bled through the western windows, painting the dust-laden floorboards in strokes of fiery orange. The images were potent, stark. Yet my breath hitched, quickening without exertion. The air itself felt altered up here, dense, watchful. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms, defying the evening's residual warmth. Imagination, I insisted. Empty places are echo chambers for fear. Drawn to the light, I moved towards the windows, framing the sunset through the jagged teeth of broken glass. And the camera died, utterly black. No flicker of warning. Raw files drained power, yes, but the abruptness felt jarring. I delved into my bag for the spare battery. My fingers, clumsy and numb, fumbled with the compartment latch. Why this trembling? The fresh battery clicked home. Power restored, I began scrolling back, reviewing the harvest. That's when I saw it. Captured in a shot of a second-floor window. A face. Not sharply defined. More an impressionistic smear on the grimy, fractured pane, warped by the glass itself. Yet, undeniably human. Dark sockets for eyes, the faint curve suggesting a mouth. I magnified the image, pixels blooming on the LCD. Glare obscured parts of it, but it remained unmistakable and impossible. I'd seen no one. The vast emptiness of the place had been absolute. A frantic drummer took up residence in my chest. I flicked through the images, faster now. There, another window, different angle, same phantom reflection. And again, and again. It haunted nearly every frame that included glass. Its position shifted, sometimes seeming to meet the lens's gaze, other times averted, lost in some private contemplation. But the visage, I knew with chilling certainty, was consistent. A deafening crash directly overhead sent me staggering back, the camera slipping from my grasp to clatter against the floorboards. This was no settling groan, no dislodged debris. This was violence, impact. Snatching up the camera, I bolted for the stairwell, my footfalls hammering a panicked rhythm on the metal treads. Another crash, nearer this time. I nearly pitched forward, rounding the landing between 3 and 2. New sounds bloomed, a heavy dragging, shuffling footsteps that were distinctly not my own, seeming to emanate from all directions at once. Hitting the second floor, I sprinted, a desperate flight past the silent ranks of sewing machines. The sunset's warmth had bled away, leaving the vast room submerged in deepening twilight. My lungs burned. Sweat plastered my shirt to my skin. A flicker in my periphery, a dark shape slipping between machines. I refused the urge to look, pouring every ounce of energy into forward motion. The stairwell leading down felt impossibly distant. My camera bag thumped against my spine, a punishing metronome. Another crash erupted behind me, punctuated by the sharp tinkle of shattering glass. I landed hard on the first floor, my ankle twisting sharply. Pain lanced up my leg, but adrenaline drowned it. The exit, a pale rectangle of dwindling daylight seen through the broken side door, beckoned. More movement danced in the peripheral gloom, the scuffing sounds closer now, pursuing. The door seemed to recede with each lunging stride. Then, bursting through into the gloaming, I ran without reservation across the fractured lot towards the sanctuary of my car. Only when my hand closed on the door handle did I risk a backward glance. The factory stood inert against the bruised sky. No flicker of movement in the black sockets of its windows. Silence, save for the ragged sawing of my own breath and the frantic thrumming in my ears. My hands shook so violently, I fumbled the keys twice before the lock yielded. I flung the bag onto the passenger seat, twisted the ignition. Tires spat gravel as I fled down the overgrown access road. Now, anchored in my own driveway, the engine quiet, I cannot compel myself inside, cannot tear my gaze from these images swimming on the screen. The face persists, etched into every relevant frame. I've zoomed, tweaked contrast, desperately sought mundane explanations, tricks of light, pareidolia. But conviction settles cold and hard in my gut. I know what registered on my sensor. And the face. It seems sharper now somehow, more present. In certain shots, I could swear it wears the ghost of a smile. My phone vibrates, a sudden intrusion. A text from Leo. "Hey man, factory pics turn out okay." I ignore it. Instead, my thumbs fly, opening my email, attaching the poisoned images, documentation, corroboration. Leo, I type, fingers still unsteady. "Look at the windows. Tell me I'm not losing my mind. Tell me you see it. Send." The waiting stretches, thick and suffocating. 5 minutes. 10. Another buzz. Leo's reply. What photos? Attachments are blank. Confusion wars with rising panic. I check my sent mail. The files are there, thumbnails visible. But opening them reveals only uniform, impenetrable black. Every single one. My hands, slick again, grapple for the camera. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Memory card check. Empty. Wiped clean. All the day's work vanished. But the scene remains. The memory holds. Every angle, every nuance of that face in the broken glass. And now, as true darkness descends, erasing the last vestiges of twilight, an insidious thought takes root. What if I look up towards the windows of my own home? Will that same face be gazing back? An hour, perhaps more, I've lingered here. My house is a dark silhouette. I always leave a lamp burning, a small beacon against the night. Not today. The windows are vacant rectangles against the siding. Then, a flicker. Behind the upstairs pane. A shadow, brief and indeterminate, there and gone. My chest constricts. A cold sweat breaks anew, chilling my back despite the cool night air. The engine sparks back to life. Staying is unthinkable. Entering, impossible. Not with those windows. Not with the possibility of what watches from within. The car reverses, tires crunching decisively now. Destination unknown. A sterile motel room, perhaps. Somewhere windowless. Somewhere to sift through the wreckage of the day. Yet, even as I pull away, my eyes dart compulsively to the rearview mirror. That face, I feel it. Imprinted not just on a vanished memory card, but on the world itself. It hasn't finished with me. The phone buzzes again. Leo. Just drove past that old mill site. Strange. Could have sworn it burned down years ago. Nothing but an empty lot there now. The phone nearly slips from my grasp. I almost blow through a red light, the world tilting momentarily. My knuckles whiten on the steering wheel. Because I was there. The crumbling brick, the shattered glass, the weight of years. I captured it, didn't I? Green light. I accelerate, merging onto the stream of headlights heading towards the highway. A reflection catches my eye in the side mirror, fleeting, peripheral, mirrored in the glass of my own car window. A suggestion of features. Dark eyes. I keep driving. The night deepens, and somewhere behind me, reflected in countless panes of glass, that face watches and waits. I suspect my camera will gather dust for a while, and windows after dark have lost their mundane familiarity. Sometimes, though, in the sleepless hours, adrift in the quiet dark, I find myself wondering about that visage. Who or what it belonged to. If others have seen it, collected images that defy explanation, harbor memories that fray at the edges of sanity, nurse a shared, unspoken fear of reflections. I wonder if they too are out there, avoiding windows, deleting photographs sight unseen, running from an amorphous dread they can neither name nor forget. And I wonder, with a certainty that chills me to the bone, if that face is watching them too. Three o'clock, the witching hour, swollen thick with rain. Not a polite rap, no tentative knuckle tap, but a brute fist hammering the old oak door, rattling it in its very frame. Solitude was my companion. The house, my shell against the deluge pounding the glass, turning the world beyond into a smeared watercolor of night. Hours the storm had raged, a relentless drumming symphony. Again, the violence at the door. Thump, thump, thump. A frantic cadence that jolted me from my seat, my book tumbling forgotten to the floor. A runaway pulse hammered against my ribs. Who could possibly brave this maelstrom at such an ungodly hour? Ancient floorboards groaned their protest as I rose, drawn unwillingly towards the window. Outside, a sickly amber street lamp bled through the downpour, illuminating little more than drowned grass and rivulets carving paths down the drive. More blows fell. "Please, open the door. I need help." The voice, ragged, thin with terror. Edging the heavy velvet curtain aside, a sliver of vision granted. A shape stood sodden in the street's center. Man-like, yes, initially. Dressed in what seemed a dark suit, plastered to his frame by the torrent, hair slicked flat against his skull. Shivering violently, a tremor visible even from my vantage point. "Please." The cry ripped through the rain's steady roar. "The car died. Just need the phone." My own phone rested heavy in my pocket, a useless weight. A dissonant chord struck within me, a deep sense of wrongness. 3 in the morning. This tempest. And why plead from the deluge-swept tarmac, not the relative shelter of the porch he'd just assaulted? My gaze flickered to the tall case clock in the hall, its pendulum slicing the silence with unnerving clarity. 2 minutes past the hour. When my eyes returned to the rain-lashed window, ice sluiced through my veins. The silhouette remained, yet warped, still vaguely human but hideously incorrect. Limbs stretched impossibly long, the torso unnaturally gaunt, and the face, dear God, the face was a void, an utter negation, smooth, featureless pitch darkness staring back from the storm. I recoiled, stumbling backward, the frantic thrumming in my chest echoing in my ears. Unreal. A trick of stormlight and fatigue, surely. It had to be. Then the assault renewed, but from the rear of the house, the kitchen door. I spun, clumsy with shock, nearly crashing to the floorboards. The kitchen lay in shadow, save for the faint spill from the living room. Wham! 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 The back door shuddered under the impacts. Then instantly, the front door again, followed immediately by 3 more concussions at the back. No living creature could bridge that distance so swiftly. Impossible speed. Scrabbling into the kitchen, I slammed switches upward. Fluorescent tubes sputtered, then flared, bathing the room in sterile white glare. A flicker of motion beyond the sink's small pane. A tenebrous form melting into the backyard gloom. Trembling fingers fumbled with my phone, misdialing the emergency number thrice before the sequence held. Now the house itself seemed under siege, blows raining down simultaneously on every window, every door. A deafening cacophony. The very walls hummed with the impacts. 911, report your emergency. The voice was tinny, distant. Something, trying to break in. My own voice fractured. 17 Willow Lane, hurry. Can you describe this person, sir? Another barrage shuttered the house, rattling dishes on their shelves. I don't know. Humanoid, but changed. A thick swallow. It has no face. Just send help. Units dispatched, the calm voice replied. Remain on the line. Are your entry points secured? A frantic mental check. Yes. Locked. All of them. I always... Darkness slammed down. Absolute. Every bulb extinguished. The streetlights outside snuffed. Only the phone's small rectangle glowed. An island in the sudden void. Sir, are you there? The power, I whispered, voice barely audible. It's gone. Everything's dark. The percussion ceased. Silence crashed in, heavier, more terrifying than the assault. Only the rain persisted, a steady hiss against the glass. No wind, no traffic, no approaching sirens. Then, a sound from the living room. Wet, slithering, like saturated fabric dragged over wood. It's inside. I choked into the phone, the words barely escaping. God help me. It's in the house. Retreating, I pressed myself into the kitchen's farthest corner, shrinking against the cold tile. The slick, dragging noise approached. Through the doorway, illuminated only by my phone's pallid glow, a shadow flowed past. Low, serpentine, its crawl unnervingly liquid, utterly alien. ETA 4 minutes, the dispatcher's voice, a lifeline fraying. Find a secure room, sir. Basement, I rasped. Going now. Hurry. I cut the connection, activating the phone's torch. Its stark beam sliced the oppressive dark, revealing... I almost wished it hadn't. Glistening trails snaked across the floorboards, originating from the living room, terminating near me. Not mere water, but viscous sable streaks shimmering obscenely in the artificial light. Silence became my creed as I stole towards the basement entrance, each footfall an eternity, every creak of the old wood a thunderclap freezing me in place. Listening, waiting. Reaching the door, I turned the knob with excruciating care. Hinges uttered a faint metallic sigh as it swung inward, revealing stairs plunging into Stygian blackness. A rustle behind me. I spun, flashlight beam slashing wildly across the kitchen. A fleeting image burned onto my retinas, something impossibly tall and skeletal, folding itself behind the refrigerator, its pallid, slick skin gleaming wetly, arms like dragged ropes brushing the floor. Thought evaporated. Pure instinct propelled me down the stairs, a tumbling descent ending with a slammed door, and the satisfying clack of the deadbolt my grandfather, bless his foresight, had installed for his precious quiet. Gratitude, sharp and fierce, pierced the terror. Cold, concrete chill seeped up from the floor. My light carved dancing shadows from shelves laden with preserves and emergency rations. The silent hulks of washer and dryer standing sentinel in the gloom. I retreated, back hitting the far foundation wall, sliding down its damp surface. Shudders racked my frame. Cold sweat slicked my skin despite the cellar's chill. Then, a sound at the door. Delicate. A dry scratch, like talons testing the wood. A heavy thump. Pressure applied from the other side. Please. The voice drifted down, warped, the original plea mangled as if played on a dying tape machine. Need help. Let me in. Clamping hands over my ears did nothing. The voice morphed, sliding up and down registers, a grotesque mimicry searching for purchase. Let main. It became a pulsing mantra, joined by a chorus, guttural growls, keening cries, whispers that scraped like dry leaves. A polyphony of wrongness, seeming to emanate not just from the door, but from the very air around me. Eyes screwed shut, palms pressed hard against my skull. A silent scream. Not real. Not happening. Piercing the demonic chorus. Sirens. Climbing, insistent, beautiful. Relief washed over me, a physical wave. The chanting ceased abruptly. Above, a frantic scrabbling, heavy and swift. Then, silence. I remained frozen, eyes shut, hands clamped tight. Even as car doors slammed, shouts echoed. Boots thudded through the rooms overhead. Only a firm knock on the basement door and a clear call. Police! Is anyone down there? Broke the spell. Yes! The sound tore from my raw throat. Here! It's bolted. Are you all right, sir? Unharmed. Just need a moment. Legs like jelly, I levered myself up, leaning heavily against the cold wall. Fumbling with the lock, I finally swung the door open onto the beams of 2 drawn flashlights held by uniformed officers. Upstairs, more lights swept. Radios crackled. Sir, what happened here? One asked gently, helping me ascend the stairs. Words failed me. How to articulate the impossible? They'd dismiss it. Delirium, drink, drugs. But the trails remained, stark against the floorboards, glistening darkly, almost purple under the official torchlight. What the hell is that? One cop muttered to the other. Dunno. Forensics are en route. Outside, the storm had broken, leaving behind dripping eaves and sodden earth. Red and blue lights pulsed across the scene, illuminating curious neighbors clustered on damp lawns. A scratchy blanket draped over my shoulders, the sterile interior of an ambulance, a paramedic's calm routine checking my pulse. My gaze lifted to my home, every window dark save one, my bedroom window on the upper floor. For an instant, a flicker behind the pane, impossibly tall, unnaturally thin. Those trailing arms, then gone, vanished with a blink. No forced entry was ever found. Every lock remained secured from within. The viscous trails, merely water contaminated with an unidentifiable oil, the report concluded blandly. The blackout. Just my house. A tripped breaker in the main panel, easily reset. Explanations neat and tidy. Utterly insufficient for the horror I'd witnessed. Within the month, I sold the house. I couldn't inhabit those rooms, couldn't dispel the certainty of unseen eyes in shadowed corners, the memory of that slick, dragging sound. New owners arrived, stripped it back to the bones, remade it. Occasionally, daylight finds me driving past. It seems altered now. Lighter, perhaps. But never after dusk. Never. Should rain begin to fall when I am out late, I flee homeward, securing every latch, every bolt with trembling hands. For I know what haunts the downpour. I know what shambles through the dark, its borrowed face a lie, its borrowed voice a lure. And sometimes, when thunder rattles the panes and the wind howls like something lost, I hear it still. A rapping, not on wood, but from within the very structure of my new walls. Faint, then bolder, insistent, accompanied by a warped, inhuman plea to be admitted. I burrow deeper beneath the covers then, pulling the fabric tight around my ears, praying for the dawn. Because some invitations must be refused. Some cries for help are traps, and nothing wholesome seeks entry in the dead, rain-lashed hours before sunrise. The night ghosts of pigment and canvas nearly claimed me, was the night I grasped that the truly precious things under guard are rarely confined to frames. It was also the night oblivion beckoned, threatening to swallow my life whole. I am Elias, and for nearly half a decade, the Atherton Gallery of Modern Masters has been my nocturnal domain, a security post usually defined by its profound quietude. Just myself, the unblinking eyes of cameras, and corridors saturated with the silent weight of artistic fortune. Or so it was, until a particular Friday breathed autumn crispness into the October air. My shift had just commenced, the familiar embrace of the small security nerve center settling around me, accompanied by the steam rising from my thermos, and the dog-eared novel that had been my companion through the week's slow hours. The gallery breathed its usual hush, a cathedral of stillness punctuated only by the low thrum of climate control and the occasional sigh of the venerable building adjusting its bones. Around the stroke of midnight, I began my first patrol. These solitary ambles through shadowed halls always held a certain allure. The masterpieces revealed in the stark, low glow of emergency lighting felt like a secret exhibition staged solely for me. It was amidst the angular provocations of the contemporary wing that a discordant note first pricked my senses. Subtle, barely there. A faint, dry scritch emanating from somewhere deeper within the gallery's heart. I froze, straining against the ambient hum. It came again, sharper this time, chased by what might have been a stifled oath. A cold drumbeat commenced in my chest. 5 years, and the most pulse-quickening event had been a moth triggering a motion sensor. This felt substantial. My radio crackled softly as I pressed the transmit button, keeping my voice a conspiratorial whisper. Elias reporting from Atherton, registering anomalous sounds, contemporary sector, proceeding to investigate. Acknowledged, Elias. The dispatcher's voice returned, thin and metallic. Maintain caution. Support units are ready should you require. My flashlight remained dormant in my grip as I advanced, each footfall measured on the polished floor. The source drew nearer, resolving into hushed, urgent tones. Expedite, damn it. The night won't wait forever. I'm moving as swiftly as prudence allows. Their countermeasures are more intricate than anticipated. Risking a glance around a partition wall, the sight turned my blood to glacial melt. 3 silhouettes, swathed in black, clustered near the vitrine housing the gallery's crown jewel. The Matisse, a vibrant study on loan, its value almost mythical. One figure manipulated the case's locking mechanism with delicate tools. Another held a device emitting a faint electronic hum. The third stood sentinel, head pivoting with predatory vigilance. I retracted swiftly, heart hammering against my ribs. This wasn't a drill. Burglars. Here. Training scenarios flashed through my mind, feeling suddenly inadequate, abstract. My hand hovered over the radio, poised to summon the cavalry, yet a paralyzing thought arrested the motion. If they heard, they'd vanish, Matisse in tow, before sirens could even echo downtown. Drawing a breath that felt thin and insufficient, I committed. Delay was the only weapon I possessed. Stall them, keep them anchored until help arrived. A gamble, yes, but the alternative, letting that blue nude vanish into the night, was unthinkable. I stepped fully into the corridor, flashlight beams slicing the darkness. Hold! Security! They spun, startled, frozen for a heartbeat in a tableau of illicit intent. Then chaos erupted. The figure by the case scrambled for a dropped duffel. The one with the electronic gadget hurled it. I ducked instinctively as it exploded against the plaster behind me. The lookout surged forward with startling velocity. His first wild swing met empty air as I sidestepped, but the second landed like a sledgehammer blow to my solar plexus, expelling all breath in a silent gasp. I staggered backward, vision swimming. "Secure the canvas. Move," one commanded, their voice tight with adrenaline. Through watering eyes, I saw frantic hands wrestling with the vitrine's final latch. Action was imperative. My fumbling fingers found the panic button on my belt, mashing it repeatedly. Instantly, klaxons shrieked to life, flooding the cavernous space with ear-splitting sound. Curses flew from the thieves as they intensified their efforts. I pushed myself upright, fueled by a surge of defiant energy. But the lookout intercepted me again, slamming my body against a jagged metal sculpture. A sickening crack resonated, whether from the artwork or my own ribs. I couldn't discern amidst the blossoming pain in my back. "Secured," cried one thief, a note of triumph threading through the alarm's howl. Through a red-tinged haze, I saw them gingerly lifting the Matisse from its cradle. "No!" The word tore from my throat as I lunged, only to be violently pinned against the cold wall by the lookout. "What about him?" The lookout grunted, voice distorted by fabric. The thief cradling the Matisse glanced at me, then sharply at their wrist. "No time. He's compromised us. Neutralize him." The lookout gave a curt nod, hand dipping inside his jacket. A sliver of reflected light. Metal. Gunmetal. Horror constricted my throat. Time warped, stretching each second into an eternity. The pounding in my ears drowned even the alarms. This was the end, wasn't it? Surrounded by beauty, extinguished by greed I couldn't contain. But then, piercing the cacophony, another sound asserted itself. Sirens. Wailing, insistent, rapidly closing. The thieves registered it simultaneously. Their leader spat a curse. "Move. We have to egress. Now." The man holding me hesitated, the weapon still leveled at my sternum. But he saw. No time, leave him. With a guttural snarl of frustration, the lookout shoved me hard against the wall one final time. My skull connected with unforgiving plaster. The world dissolved into fractured light and shadow. I slumped to the floor, consciousness fraying. Through the encroaching fog, I glimpsed their retreating forms. The Matisse clutched like a shield, heading for the emergency exit. A final, desperate surge propelled my hand towards the nearest object, a compact, twisted metal sculpture. With the last vestiges of strength, I flung it. Improbably, it found its mark, tangling in the legs of the thief carrying the painting. He crashed down, the Matisse skittering across the floor. "Leave it!" the leader yelled as the fallen man scrambled. The sirens were deafening now, seemingly inside the building itself. The trio vanished through the emergency doors just as the main entrance exploded inward, revealing a phalanx of police officers, weapons raised. The ensuing hour became a disorienting montage. Paramedics assessing, officers questioning, forensic technicians dusting and bagging. I learned later, between waves of nausea, that while the thieves had evaporated into the night, their hurried exit had left a trail of crucial evidence. The Matisse, miraculously, was safe, bearing only minor abrasions from its tumble. As I sat cocooned in the metallic chill of an ambulance, an ice pack numbing my skull, the gallery director, Ms. Vance, appeared. Her face was drawn, pale, but her eyes held a fierce light. "Elias," she breathed, her hand closing over mine. "You saved the Matisse. You saved everything. How can we possibly thank you?" A weak smile touched my lips. "Just part of the job, Ms. Vance." Yet, en route to the hospital, clarity pierced the throbbing ache. It hadn't merely been about safeguarding canvas and pigment. In those frantic, terrifying moments, it had become a stand against the casual arrogance of taking, against those who believed desire negated consequence. The subsequent weeks were a blur of follow-up interviews, a formal commendation from the city, even a modest feature in the local gazette. Atherton fortified its security protocols and offered me a supervisory role. Yet every night now, as I traced my familiar path through the hushed galleries, the echoes linger, the furtive movements, the brutal struggle, the chilling certainty of imminent death. That night inscribed itself onto me. It underscored the razor-thin membrane between sanctuary and peril, the suddenness with which equilibrium can shatter. My reverence for this place, for the silent communion with art in the deep hours, remains undimmed, but it's now tempered by an acute awareness that the test could recur at any moment. And if it does, I will face it. Because the true revelation of that night wasn't about the value of the objects within these walls. It was discovering the unexpected reserves of courage coiled within oneself when everything hangs precariously in the balance. So, should you find yourself wandering the Atherton Gallery, pause before the Matisse. Look closely, and perhaps remember that behind the luminescence of priceless creations stand sentinels, willing to risk all. Some treasures transcend their market value. They are fragments of our collective soul, a legacy worth defending. That first night, the thunder was a physical thing, a concussive blow against the window panes, each lightning strike a visceral jolt deep in my gut. Out there, adrift on Uncle Emrys's land, I was keeper of horses and guardian of a dilapidated toolshed, tasked with simple duties I'd assumed would dissolve into the quiet monotony of rural isolation. How wrong I was. A mile of spitting gravel separates Emrys's property from the asphalt artery of the main road. The driveway, a pale scar across the land, crunches a lonely rhythm under tires. To one side, pasture land where a few horses drift like ghosts in the fading light. To the other, a dense barricade of skeletal trees and grasping scrub. The tool shed hunkers near the property's edge, past the low-slung stable, a structure of weathered planks breathing decay, pierced by the single, naked wire of a dangling light bulb. Uncle Emrys had been explicit. Keep it locked. He'd pressed a heavy combination padlock into my hand, demonstrated its function on the door's handle and chain, and extracted a promise to verify its security each night before sleep. Sundown bled gold across the western hills as I performed the evening rites. Hay bales, heavy with dust and summer scent, hefted into the stable's gloom. The horses, placid giants, exhaled warm sighs, tails flicking metronomically. I topped their water trough, the hose gurgling. But the air itself felt weighted, cloying, pregnant with the bruise-colored clouds massing on the horizon. A glance towards the tool shed then. Door opened. The switch clicked decisively down into darkness. The heavy combination lock snapped shut, tested with a solid tug. Secure. The farmhouse door groaned its ancient protest as I entered. Inside, the air hung thick with the scent of disuse, a musty archive of stillness. I deposited my bag in the guest room, unearthed some leftover stew, and warmed it on the stove. As I ate, the wind began its prelude, rattling the windows with tentative claws. By 9, perhaps 10, the heavens broke. Rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, a liquid curtain drumming furiously on the roof. Lightning tore the night open, brief, blinding exposures of the yard, stark white, then plunged back into black. The thunder followed, a physical tremor that vibrated through the floorboards and into my bones. Unease prickled beneath my skin, amplified by the profound darkness outside. The television offered only fractured images, ghosts swimming in static. Useless comfort. The bathroom lights flickered, a common ailment of the old lines as I brushed my teeth. It was on the way to the guest room, a passing glance through the living room window, that froze me. A particularly violent fissure of lightning ripped the darkness, etching the scene outside in stark monochrome. The stable, the corral fence, the dripping trees, and the tool shed. Its single bulb burned, a sickly yellow eye staring defiantly into the storm. A cold fist clenched in my stomach. I turned it off. The memory was absolute. The downward flick of the switch, the satisfying click. Yet there it glowed. Logic scrabbled for purchase. A mistake, faulty wiring. But the certainty of my actions held firm. From the hall closet, a stiff canary yellow raincoat, smelling faintly of mildew. An old torch, its beam weak and wavering, clutched in my hand. Outside, the porch light sizzled under the onslaught. Wind flung icy needles of rain against my face. Each step on the gravel was an overloud betrayal of my presence. The torch beam danced erratically, illuminating slick, streaming wood on the stable walls. Within, the horses were silent shapes against the greater darkness. Only the storm spoke. The roar of rain, the low growl of thunder. Another lightning flare. The shed's interior light flickered, sputtered, died. By the time my boots scuffed the damp earth before its door, the shed was a black void. My hand reached for the familiar cold metal of the handle, but my fingers met only damp wood. The torch beam trembled downwards, finding the padlock nestled absurdly in the mud beside the sagging chain. Not forced, not unlocked. Simply placed. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The door yielded to a hesitant push, groaning inward. The torchlight swept the interior. First, the light switch, still flipped up, in the on position. Yet, the bulb overhead remained dead. The air inside was thick with the scent of damp earth. And something else. Something faintly organic, like decay. Water plinked a mournful rhythm from leaks in the roof onto the concrete floor. Tools hung like silent accusations on the walls. Shovels, rakes, shears with hungry jaws. A skeletal wheelbarrow slumped in one corner. My trainers squeaked on the slick floor as I edged inside. The beam crawled over shelves laden with paint tins and forgotten boxes. Nothing disturbed. Nothing missing. Was I losing my grip? Had I fumbled the lock myself in the twilight? Then, a sound. Sharp. Sudden. The wet, ragged intake of a breath, quickly stifled, heavy and labored. It emanated from the deepest shadows, the far corner. Ice bloomed in my veins. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. A strangled, pathetic sound escaped my lips, meant to be a word. Hello. My own voice, alien and thin. Only the relentless drip, drip, drip answered. The torch beam shaking now, stabbed towards the source. It illuminated damp concrete, warped pallets leaning drunkenly, cobweb-shrouded boxes. No form, no figure. An animal. No, that sound. It was wrenchingly human. The fine hairs on my neck prickled, alive with cold dread. Retreating step by cautious step, the torch beam pinned that accusing corner. Was that another stifled gasp, or just the wind sighing through a crack? My heart felt dangerously large, threatening to burst from my chest. No flicker of movement in the shadows. Back until the stormy air was on my skin again. I slammed the shed door, the sound swallowed by the deluge. Fumbling fingers wrestled the cold chain, forcing the padlock back into its shackle. Then I ran, heedless of the slick ground, splashing through puddles, back to the dubious sanctuary of the house. The front door bolted, a heavy dining chair wedged beneath the knob. A futile, childish gesture, born of sheer panic. I stood there, dripping and trembling, listening to the storm rage outside, and the echo of that awful breath rage within. Someone had been in there. Silent. Unseen. Why? Sleep was a shallow, broken thing, punctuated by thunderclaps that felt like blows. Dawn arrived pale and washed clean. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the curtains, finding me stiff and unrested. Outside, the world dripped. Puddles mirrored a placid blue sky. The horses grazed peacefully by the fence. I approached the tool shed with trepidation. Bathed in innocuous morning light, it looked merely old, not menacing. The padlock hung undisturbed. The combination turned smoothly. The door swung open. Inside, stillness. The damp concrete floor showed no trace of intrusion, no muddy prints beyond my own from the night before. Tools remained ranked on their hooks, nothing out of place. I reached for the switch. A click, a flicker, and the bare bulb sprang to life, casting a steady, mundane glow. If a presence had shared this space with me hours before, it had vanished like smoke, leaving not a whisper of its passage. I locked the door again, the tumblers clicking with unnerving finality. Later, needing a hand with shifting feed sacks, I recalled Emrys mentioning the adjacent caretaker. A winding dirt track led to a small, weathered cabin where an ancient pickup rusted quietly. Mr. Abernathy emerged, a man etched by time, maybe 60-odd years, with a thick gray mustache and a pronounced limp. When I introduced myself, Silas, and cautiously broached the subject of disturbances, perhaps intruders near the shed, his eyes flickered strangely. A subtle shift, a downward glance, a slight tightening around the mouth. He shook his head, a gesture too quick, too final. "No," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves. "Nothing like that around here." He made a vague, dismissive motion with his hand, an unspoken command to let it lie, then abruptly asked about the hay. My attempts to circle back were met with polite but firm deflections, walls I couldn't seem to penetrate. The remainder of the day unfolded under a deceptively peaceful sky. Chores done, stable cleaned, horses content. Yet the unease lingered, a low hum beneath the surface. That night, vigilance was my ritual. Every lock tested, every shadow scrutinized. The tool shed received a final, thorough inspection. Light off, lock tugged until my knuckles whitened. Back in the house, a solitary sandwich, the television flickering an old black and white film, my ears strained for any sound beyond the screen. Exhaustion eventually claimed me. Until midnight. A sound pulled me from shallow sleep, a furtive, muffled scrape. Seemingly just outside, I held my breath. Silence, save for the frantic thudding in my ears. No wind tonight, not a branch. Rising silently, torch in hand but unlit, I crept to the window. Moonlight silvered the familiar shapes of the yard. Stable, fences, trees etched in shadow. Empty. Then a faint clink. Metallic. Unmistakable. Heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I slipped on boots, bypassed the code for silence, and eased the front door open a fraction. The night air was cool, still. Nothing moved. The scraping resumed, low and insistent, seeming to originate near the shed. Barely breathing, I slipped outside, stepping carefully on the porch boards, then onto the gravel, each crunch an agony of noise despite my care. Moonlight was my only guide. The sound grew clearer, a metallic rattle, the distinct jangle of a chain being manipulated. Then, abrupt silence. I froze, ducking behind the solid corner of the stable, listening intently. Only the thrumming silence of the rural night. Peeking around the edge, my gaze fixed on the shed. It stood dark, inert. But the padlock, it hung from the hasp, swinging ever so slightly, glinting in the moonlight. Locked, it appeared, but definitely disturbed. A full minute passed. My pulse roared. No figure detached itself from the shadows. No footsteps crunched on the gravel. A sudden drift of inexplicably cold air raised goosebumps on my arms. Another minute stretched into eternity. The courage that had propelled me out into the storm-lashed night had deserted me now, under the calm, watchful moon. Opening that door again, alone in the dark, felt impossible. I retreated, walking backward at first, eyes locked on the silent shed, then turned and fled the quiet menace of the yard, securing myself inside the house once more. Sleep remained elusive, each house-settling creak a potential footfall. Morning light revealed the shed unchanged, lock securely fastened, door immobile. Inside, the same dusty order prevailed. Was I inventing these nocturnal dramas? Later, seeking some context, any scrap of local lore, I approached Mr. Abernathy again, mentioning odd noises, perhaps old stories tied to the property. I saw that guarded look return instantly. He cut me off, his tone firm despite its rasp. "Best leave be," he muttered, refusing to meet my eye. When I pressed, asking about past troubles, break-ins, anything unusual, he sighed, a weary sound. "Folks get spooked out here," he conceded vaguely. "Alone in the dark, shadows play tricks. Just keep the shed locked tight, boy. Don't fret on it." His dismissal felt less like reassurance and more like a warning. The remaining nights passed under a fragile truce. I performed my duties, the locking, the checking, the feeding, with a heightened awareness that bordered on paranoia. Faint rustlings in the undergrowth, the sigh of the wind. Each sound was suspect. But the spectral light did not reappear. The lock remained undisturbed. Yet the feeling persisted, a prickling certainty of unseen eyes whenever I neared that weathered shed. When Uncle Emrys returned, I recounted the unnerving events, the phantom light, the displaced lock, the disquieting sounds. He listened, his expression unreadable, then simply nodded. "Place has its ways," was all he offered. "Had a few odd turns out here myself over the years." He volunteered no specifics. I felt no inclination to press him. Even now, distance hasn't dulled the memory. The knot of unease tightens whenever I recall that week. The inexplicable light, the strangely deposited lock, Mr. Abernathy's deliberate reticence, and most of all, that unseen presence in the dark corner, marked only by a single, ragged breath. Perhaps it was faulty wiring, perhaps a transient seeking shelter, or perhaps something else entirely, something the whispering woods and the watchful night chose not to reveal. All I know is the solitude of that property is forever tainted. And sometimes, when thunder shakes the glass late at night, I hear that heavy, halting breath again, just at the edge of hearing. Acquiring anything from that suffocating trove on Bishop Lane should have been beneath consideration. Its windows, filmed with the cataract of years, and the salt-bleached plank bearing its name, hardly inspired confidence. Yet the looking-glass, it snagged my gaze the instant I ambled past. There it leaned, flanking the entrance, half eclipsed by a precarious ziggurat of scuffed valises. I halted, pressing my forehead to the grimy pane. Dark timber framed it, rosewood perhaps, incised with hypnotic, labyrinthine carvings that seemed to pull vision itself into their depths. The silvered surface possessed that subtle undulation common to antique glass, warping reflections just enough to lend them an uncanny vitality. My living room wall, a stark vacancy opposite the sofa, cried out for adornment. This felt ordained. A discordant clang from the bell overhead announced my entry. The air inside was thick, a composite fume of desiccated wood, brittle paper, and some other, less identifiable decay. The shop constricted around me, a narrow gullet choked with towering shelves, leaving barely a channel for passage. From behind a monolithic armoire, the proprietor materialized, meticulously wiping his palms on a rag. He was advanced in years, perhaps past 70, spectacled, his scalp showing through sparse silvered hair. "The mirror," I managed, gesturing toward the window. "Its price." He peered at it, then appraised me. 900. dry laugh escaped me. For that relic? Surely not. 850, he countered, his voice devoid of inflection. 19th century. The frame is hand-worked. A brief, spiritless haggle ensued, concluding at 700, more than budgeted. Yet an undeniable compulsion anchored me there, forbidding retreat. He assisted me in conveying it to my vehicle, handling the piece with a delicacy surprising for his apparent frailty. Best keep it veiled when not attended, he advised as we maneuvered it into the trunk's cavity. Direct sun harms the wood. I offered a non-committal nod, my thoughts already arranging its placement. The wall facing my couch yearned for focus. The mirror would capture the window light, amplify the room's perceived dimensions. Securing it to the wall that evening consumed an hour. The object possessed an unexpected heft. Twice I had to reset the anchors, drilling fresh holes to ensure they'd bear the load. When I finally stepped back, muscles screaming across my shoulders, knuckles dotted with tiny crimson nicks from the frame's sharp corners, it hung impeccably, precisely the presence the room demanded. I collapsed onto the sofa, beer in hand, admiring the way the lamp's amber glow pooled and shifted within its surface. The frame's intricate geometries sculpted fugitive shadows, while the glass's slight warp rendered the reflected chamber painterly, almost unreal. That was the moment of the first intrusion. A mere flicker, poolside in the mirror's expanse, suggestive of swift passage. I spun around. Nothing, naturally. Only my vacant living room, silent and still. Another swallow of beer. Tired eyes, I reasoned. Illusions born of shadow play. The subsequent days unfolded in unremarkable sequence. Work, commute, home, television. The familiar cadence. The mirror assimilated, becoming just another fixture. Occasionally, catching my own image passing, I'd adjust my posture, smooth my hair. Nothing more. Until Thursday night. Sofa again, a desultory sports broadcast murmuring from the screen. Fingers tracing patterns on my phone's glass. Movement, again, in the mirror. Sharper this time. A dark form, human scale, traversing the reflected space from edge to edge. My head snapped around, a vertebrae cracking in protest. Emptiness. The apartment held only me. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I rose, conducted a meticulous search. Every room, every closet. Though logic insisted I was alone. Doors secured, windows latched. Nothing disturbed. Returning to the living room, I stood before the looking glass for a long interval, scrutinizing my reflection, the space captured behind me. All appeared ordinary, save for the subtle distortions inherent in the aged glass. I nearly persuaded myself of hallucination. Nearly. But it recurred the following night and the night after. Always from the couch. Always glimpsed peripherally. Dark intrusions gliding across the mirror's background. Sometimes singular, sometimes in pairs or trios. Never submitting to direct gaze, only revealing themselves when my focus lay elsewhere. I began documenting, seeking correlation. The phenomena favored the hours between 8 and midnight. They thrived in low illumination. They were utterly silent, and they seemed to be gaining confidence. A week after installation, absorbed in a novel, I perceived one of the shapes halt mid-transit within the glass. Just stop, motionless. I compelled myself to maintain my stare upon the printed page, heart battering my sternum. From the corner of my eye, it registered. A dark, man-shaped silhouette, perfectly still within the reflection. It remained thus for what felt like an eternity, but was likely mere minutes. When the tension became unbearable and I finally looked up, it had dissolved. Sleep became a fraught, shallow thing. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the building settling, jolted me upright. The notion felt preposterous, a haunted mirror. Yet the evidence of my senses was irrefutable. The shapes accrued definition, substance. Their movements acquired intention, no longer just passing through. They now seemed to pause, to observe. Sometimes catching a fleeting glimpse, one appeared oriented toward my reflection, watching. One night I draped the mirror in a sheet. The visual incursions ceased, but I could hear the fabric stir, a faint, persistent rustling, though the room was utterly still, devoid of drafts. When, 3 days later, I summoned the nerve to unveil it, the glass seemed somehow dimmer, as if it had absorbed the very darkness it had harbored. I tried the antique shop's number, disconnected. A drive past Bishop Lane revealed windows papered over, a for lease placard stark against the door. The proprietor had vanished, taking any provenance the mirror might have possessed with him. The internet offered cold comfort. Tales of haunted glass abounded, lurid and fictionalized. None resonated with my specific experience. No information surfaced regarding mirrors bearing similar frames, similar uncanny geometries. Last night marked a new nadir. Drifting on the edge of sleep on the sofa, some instinct prized my eyelids open. Within the mirror, a figure stood directly behind my reflected self, taller than the others, darker, possessing a terrifying solidity. My own reflection remained clear, but the entity behind it was a negation, a hole punched in reality, a man-shaped absence of light. Paralysis seized me, breath hitched in my throat. The figure raised what could only be an arm, extending it, reaching toward my reflection's shoulder. A point of intense cold bloomed there on my actual shoulder, sharp and precise, like glacial ice pressed through my shirt. My throat constricted. The room began to tilt. Then, salvation arrived via technology. My phone shrilled, shattering the tableau. The figure evaporated. I scrambled backward off the couch, lungs aching for air. The call was from Clara, my sister, inquiring about weekend arrangements. Never had a mundane inquiry felt so profoundly like rescue. I spent the remainder of the night in my car. Re-entering that room, facing what might await in the glass, was inconceivable. This morning, feigning illness, I skipped work and began researching removal services. But the mirror's sheer weight defies solitary effort, and the explanation required feels insurmountable. So here I sit, nursing lukewarm coffee in a generic cafe, committing this narrative to my phone, wrestling with options. Prudence dictates abandoning the apartment, leaving the cursed object behind. Yet the thought of inflicting this upon some unsuspecting successor is abhorrent. Besides, a chilling intuition suggests these entities, whatever their nature, have now fixed their interests specifically upon me. They might pursue. Dusk gathers outside. A decision looms. Return home or seek refuge in a motel. My phone vibrates. Clara, again. Likely concerned by my silence. I should answer, confide everything. But the specter of disbelief, of being branded delusional, holds me captive. The shapes in the mirror are real. The glacial touch on my shoulder was real. Certainty offers no solace against terror. My coffee is frigid. The barista casts worried glances my way. I've occupied this table for hours. Through the cafe window, my car sits solitary in the lot. I could drive there now, stride into my apartment, wrestle that mirror from the wall, drag it out, shatter it if necessary, expunge it. But what if that act is precisely their aim? What if dismantling its prison makes matters infinitely worse? Another vibration. A text from Clara. Where are you? I'm at your place. Ice floods my veins. She's there. Now. In my living room. Likely standing directly before that accursed glass. Keys clenched, I bolt for the car. The drive home stretches into an agonizing eternity. Speed limits disregarded, palms slick on the wheel. I burst through my apartment door, shouting her name. She stands in the living room, frowning at her phone, startled by my violent entry. Elias, there you are. Been trying you all day. Everything okay? My gaze flicks to the mirror. Clara's reflection stares back, clear, mundane. No attendant shadows, no dark figures lurking. Nothing amiss. Yeah, I gasp, struggling for composure. Fine. Just under the weather. She scrutinizes my face, unconvinced. You look dreadful. Getting any sleep? A forced chuckle. Not much. Work stress. I maneuver myself between her and the mirror, affecting nonchalance. Hey, since you're here, mind giving me a hand taking this mirror down? Thinking of changing the decor. An eyebrow arches. The one you just hung. Thought you adored it. Changed my mind. I lie smoothly. Doesn't quite work. She shrugs. Okay, sure. Where's it going? My car for now. Plan to sell it. Together, we manage to unhook the mirror from its anchors. Still profoundly heavy, but manageable between us. I insisted on shrouding it completely in a thick blanket before we carried it downstairs. Clara shot me questioning looks, but offered no argument. You absolutely sure you're okay? She asked as I secured the trunk. You're acting really strange. I nodded, striving for normalcy. Just exhausted. Thanks for the help, truly. She didn't seem persuaded, but let it drop. After her departure, I remained in my car for a long while, eyes fixed on the trunk in the rearview mirror. The shrouded object was merely a bulky shape beneath the blanket, yet as twilight deepened, bleeding shadows across the asphalt, I could swear I detected motion beneath the fabric, a subtle shifting, as if something were testing its confines. I turned the ignition. My destination remained undetermined, only that it needed to be distant, final. Perhaps a deep quarry lake or a remote landfill. Somewhere its rediscovery was improbable. The engine hummed. In the rear view, the trunk cavity seemed unnaturally black, absorbing the fading light. I shifted into reverse. Turning to glance over my shoulder, my eyes caught a flicker of movement reflected in the rear view. A dark shape unfurling from the trunk's depths, reaching toward the back seat. Heart slamming, I jammed the gear shift into park and scrambled out. The trunk appeared undisturbed. The blanket lay inert. All seemed secure. But conviction settled cold and hard. They were within, waiting, consolidating their strength. Hours have passed. I remain here, parked, composing this account on my phone. Night has fully descended. Mine is the last vehicle. Periodically, I check the trunk, though the thought of opening it induces nausea. The blanket remains still, yet sometimes I imagine faint ripples disturbing its surface, betraying movement beneath. Clara texted again, suggesting dinner. I should go, rejoin the world of the normal, but I cannot leave the mirror unattended in the car overnight. Cannot countenance the risk of a break-in, of this malevolence being unleashed upon another soul. So, I will drive. Destination unknown, but far, isolated. Tonight, this must be confronted, concluded, one way or another. I must. The shapes, the presences in the mirror, are undeniably real. What remains obscure is their motive, their reason for choosing me. But I intend to ensure they never have the opportunity to reveal it. Starting the engine again. The trunk looks quiescent in the rear view, but reflections are liars I can no longer afford to trust. I will drive until I find a place suitable for final disposition. Perhaps then, sleep might return, untroubled by the knowledge of being watched from the other side of the glass. The parking lot lamps stutter overhead. It is time to depart. I only pray that whatever resides within that mirror remains contained until I reach the end of this journey, and I pray I never again set foot inside an antique shop. A scant 10 minutes, my sole requirement, post-shift from the bustling bistro. Just that brief interval, cocooned within my car, adrift in the digital currents, allowing the day's friction, abrasive patrons, labyrinthine espresso orders to dissolve. It was my inviolable ceremony, a pocket of quietude before confronting the looming mountain of coursework within. The parking space before our home offered the ideal geometry, near enough to bathe in the porch light's amber glow, yet sufficiently distant from the stark street lamp to feel sequestered. My mother found the habit peculiar, this delay in crossing the threshold, unable to grasp how these fleeting, solitary moments recalibrated my weary mind. Tonight, however, held a dissonance. Initially elusive, the cause remained hidden. The autumn atmosphere seemed to possess unusual density, pressing against the car's glass like a tangible weight. My phone's luminescence caught a flicker in the gloom behind me, an anomaly of shadow where none should stir, pirouetting at the very periphery of sight. A swift turn revealed nothing but the familiar tableau, our tranquil suburban avenue, deserted save for Mrs. Gable, promenading her cloud-like Bichon frieze. Her wave met mine, a commonplace gesture I returned while attempting to quell the tendril of disquiet snaking up my spine. Back to the screen, the hypnotic scroll of fleeting videos. Yet now, an acute sensitivity tuned my ears to the world outside. The metallic sigh of the cooling engine block, the papery rustle of wind-harried leaves, the distant clatter of a toppled bin down the lane. The shadows pooling in my rearview mirror felt unnaturally deep, voids absorbing the faint light. Movement snagged my attention once more, sharper this time. A reflection glancing off the side mirror, a figure melting downwards behind my vehicle. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs as my fingers scrambled for the ignition keys, poised for a desperate sprint towards the house. But the decision was wrested from me. Our front door sprang open violently. Mom materialized on the porch, arms flailing with an alarming urgency. "Eliza, inside, now." Her voice, laced with an unfamiliar thread of pure panic, sliced through the night. No hesitation. Bag clutched tight, I bolted, conquering the porch steps in 2 frantic bounds. Inside, Mom slid the deadbolt home, her hands trembling visibly. "Someone was watching you," she breathed, enveloping me in a fierce embrace. I stepped out for the mail. Saw him crouched right by your window, peering in. He had his phone raised, Eliza, like he was filming. My knees threatened to buckle as the chilling significance settled. How long, how many other evenings had I sat there, blissfully unaware, under observation? Sirens wailed closer within minutes of Mom's call. The responding officers found little tangible evidence, save for impressions in the damp earth flanking my car, and something else that turned my blood to ice. The ghostly outlines of handprints, and a face pressed against my window, illuminated starkly in the beam of an officer's flashlight. Smudges marring the condensation that had gathered on the glass. Irrefutable proof of proximity, of someone violating what I considered my private sanctuary. The following day initiated a cascade of fortifications. Dad installed motion-activated floodlights, bathing the property's perimeter in sudden glare. Mom acquired security cameras, synced to deliver alerts directly to our phones. My brother lent his expertise to tint my car windows. Now I could observe the world outside, but it could not easily peer in. Incremental adjustments, each contributing to a fragile reconstruction of security. Yet the violation resonated beyond our walls, rippling through the neighborhood. Mrs. Gable spearheaded the formation of a community watch collective. Neighbors began exchanging security footage, coordinating dog walking times, noting unfamiliar vehicles. Police patrols intensified during the twilight hours, coinciding with residents returning from work. At the bistro, my manager swiftly rearranged closing shifts. No one departed unaccompanied after dark. Enhanced lighting flooded the staff parking area, and new cameras monitored every conceivable angle. Regular customers, unprompted, began escorting employees to their cars, forging an informal protective fellowship. My post-work decompression ritual persisted, albeit transformed. Now I sought refuge in the brightly lit staff break room, or on our well-illuminated porch, or within the living room, curtains firmly drawn. Sometimes Mom would join me, not hovering, but simply occupying the space nearby. These quiet interludes felt newly sacred, their value derived not from solitude, but from assured safety. The individual who watched me was never apprehended, but the police investigation unearthed reports of analogous incidents scattered across town. Young people shadowed to their vehicles, clandestine figures photographing through residential windows, unexplained handprints discovered on glass panes at dawn. Each narrative thread wove into a disturbing tapestry of predatory surveillance. Our neighborhood, however, countered not with paralyzing fear, but with resolute action. Self-defense workshops materialized at the community center. Local businesses designated themselves as safe havens, places to wait if unease struck. Teenagers received education on situational awareness, on the critical importance of heeding their intuition. One morning, vibrant chalk inscriptions adorned the pavement before our house. You are not alone, and we watch out for each other. The entire street bloomed with similar affirmations, a colorful testament to collective vigilance. Mrs. Gable later confessed, with a wry smile, to mobilizing the middle school art club for the task. The ordeal irrevocably altered my perception of private moments. Their necessity remained undiminished, vital for navigating a clamorous world. But I comprehended now that genuine privacy isn't synonymous with isolation. It resides in secure enclaves, bolstered by a network of individuals invested in your well-being. Just last week, I observed a young woman lingering in her car after school, phone aglow. I saw my former self in her posture, recognized that profound need for a moment's pause. Instead of merely passing by, I paused at a respectful distance, waiting until she looked up. We spoke briefly about vigilance, about balancing mental respite with awareness. My car windows now displayed different kinds of prints, laminated student artwork from the bistro's weekly children's hour, uplifting phrases penned in washable marker, declarations that this space, once a point of vulnerability, is now watched over, shielded by community spirit. Sometimes late at night, a reflexive glance still checks the rearview mirror more often than strictly needed. An unexpected rustle in the darkness can still elicit a jolt. But these flickers of remembered fear no longer dictate my actions. They serve as reminders to remain alert, to trust my instincts, to maintain the boundaries that ensure my safety. This was the enduring lesson of that night. Privacy is not a given. It is a construct, forged collectively through shared awareness, mutual support, and the quiet alchemy that transforms moments of fear into catalysts for connection. My 10 minutes of peace possess a deeper resonance now, cherished not for their solitude, but for the invisible, protective web woven by a community that understands their profound importance. A resonant peal, stark and antique, shattered the midnight quiet, jolting me from sleep. It wasn't a dream's echo. This sound possessed weight, the clangorous summons of some forsaken country belfry, vibrating deep within my bones. My chest seized. A frantic drummer took residence behind my ribs. Above, the ceiling swam in impenetrable darkness as the reverberations pulsed against the walls, fading, yet lingering like a phantom limb. My skull felt packed with lead. Still, I forced myself upright, limbs heavy. The need to decipher this unreality paramount. Was I truly awake? I scrubbed at my eyes, vision swimming, but the tolling persisted, an erratic cadence, silence, then a cascade of chimes that seemed to mock rhythm itself. Bare feet met cool floorboards. I swung my legs out, standing alone in the tomb-like stillness of the house. No guests expected, none ever truly welcome in this solitary existence. My phone, cold comfort on the nightstand, became a torch. Its beam sliced the black, illuminating the familiar geography of my bedroom. The hulking wardrobe, the impassive dresser, the bedside lamp standing sentinel. Nothing stirred. No object capable of such brazen sound declared itself. Into the corridor I ventured, the compact layout of my home offering little distance to traverse, yet each step felt elongated, fraught. Careful footfalls on worn wood. One room, then the next, swept by the phone's pale eye. The bell tolled anew, its origins seemingly coalescing in the living room ahead. I pivoted, flashlight beams skittering across plaster walls barren of anomaly. Entering the living space, I played the light across the coffee table's surface, the dormant television screen, the bookshelf crammed with silent narratives, the graveyard of last night's glass bottles. No bell, no errant metallic trinket, ghostly resonance drifting from the kitchen. I froze, straining to hear above my own ragged breath. A clammy chill traced my spine despite the room's cool air. I advanced to the kitchen threshold, the beam scanning countertops cluttered with the aftermath of dinner, stacked plates, scattered crumbs, the faucet inert. The refrigerator's low thrum offered its usual, mundane counterpoint, but it wasn't that sound. A single chime, delicate yet sharp, now seemed to emanate from behind me, back towards the bedroom I'd just vacated. Disorientation bloomed. The echo played tricks, a sonic shell game. I retraced my steps, probing corners with the light. Each time I arrived where the sound had beckoned, it had already migrated, a phantom tormentor leading me in circles. 15 minutes bled away in this futile pursuit. Frustration curdled into something sharper, akin to panic. My mouth was parchment dry. I realized I was gasping softly, exertion born not of movement, but of sheer tension. My stomach churned. The thought surfaced. Check outside. Perhaps a neighbor, the street. But before I could act, the ringing ceased utterly. Silence crashed down, absolute and profound, amplifying the frantic thrumming in my own ears, the pulse hammering at my temples. I stood suspended in the hallway, relief warring with a primal alertness. My body coiled, anticipating the next blow. Taking a shaky breath, I resolved to inspect the bedroom one final time. Down the short passage, I pushed the bedroom door inward, sweeping the flashlight across the walls, and stopped. There, splashed against the plaster like grotesque Rorschach blots, were circles, large, perfectly round, stained a peculiar, patchy ochre, the color of old blood or deep-seated rust. I blinked, searching my memory. Had they always been there? Surely not. I drew closer, extending a hesitant finger to touch one. A fine, flaky powder came away, leaving a faint, brownish smear on my skin. I stared at my fingertip, then tilted my gaze upward. More circles marred the ceiling, spaced irregularly, as if something heavy and round had been pressed there, branding the surface. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. A knot tightened in my gut. My eyes darted, seeking explanation. The familiar bed, the closed wardrobe, the locked windows offered none. These weren't water stains, not mold. They felt deliberate, imprinted. The phantom bells tolling resonated anew in my mind. Mechanically, I sought the anchor of time. My phone showed just past 3. I forced myself towards bed, seeking oblivion, but my gaze kept snagging on the walls. The circles seemed to pulse faintly in the gloom, more vivid with each glance. Eventually, sheer weariness dragged me under. Sunlight, slatted and intrusive, pierced the blinds when I next surfaced, late morning already upon me. My first conscious act, check the walls. The circles remained, stark against the plaster, though daylight robbed them of some nocturnal menace, rendering them faded, almost mundane. I touched one again. No residue came away this time. My day unfolded in a haze of distraction. A tasteless breakfast, the television murmuring ignored inanities. The bell. Its impossible sound echoed in the chambers of my thoughts. By noon, embarrassment warred with unease. No bell resided here. I owned nothing capable of that resonant cry. A waking dream, auditory hallucination. But the circles were undeniably real. A cursory search revealed more. Fainter siblings on the hallway walls, small but distinct. Closets yielded nothing. Furniture concealed no secrets. The attic hatch remained sealed. Nightfall brought a familiar dread. Sleep felt distant, a shore I couldn't reach. I numbed myself with flickering screens, letting manufactured noise drown out the memory of the bell. Around midnight, silence reclaimed the house. My eyelids grew heavy. I extinguished the living room lights, moved towards the bedroom's sanctuary. The instant my foot crossed the threshold, it struck. A single, violent ring, shearing through the quiet, sending a galvanic shock through my system. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, listening, waiting. Seconds later, its echo answered from the hallway. I retreated, legs trembling, hands clenched into useless fists. The darkness felt absolute, suffocating. Fumbling, I found the hallway switch. The bulb flickered, then cast a weak, buzzing light, and I saw them. More circles. They proliferated across the plaster, larger now, the ochre darkening to a raw, angry umber, like freshly exposed corrosion. I approached one, laid my palm flat against its strangely rough surface. Pulling my hand back, I saw them, rust-colored flakes clinging to my skin. A gasp hitched in my throat. I wiped my hand reflexively on my trousers, stumbling back, mind racing, searching for action, for reason. The bell pealed again, twice from the living room. I turned, forcing my thoughts towards the sound, towards the source. I had to know. Slowly, I advanced, navigating a corridor now tattooed with these unsettling sigils. Tension radiated from my shoulders. My jaw ached from clenching. In the living room, the bell fell silent once more. I hit the overhead light switch. The room sprang into view, revealing a fresh infestation. Circles blooming on the ceiling, clustered near the windows. One even branding the painted wood of a kitchen cabinet door, visible from the doorway. All shared that same corroded hue, that uniform size, roughly the diameter of a small, heavy bowl. Crouching by one near the floor, I squinted. The mark looked like an imprint, thin yet definite, as if a ring of hot, decaying metal had been pressed hard against the wall. That night became a waking vigil. Hours spent pacing, checking, rechecking. The bell chimed sporadically, its voice capricious, sometimes intimate, whispering in my ear. Other times distant, calling from another part of the house entirely. Each peal brought a rush of icy dread, a prickling awareness at the nape of my neck. I tried calling Leo, needing a voice, an anchor, but only reached his voicemail. The urge to flee warred with a paralyzing fear of what lay beyond the door. More marks. The bell echoing down the empty street. Exhaustion eventually claimed me on the living room sofa around 4, waking me to harsh daylight, a stiff neck, and a profound weariness. The circles remained, silent accusations on every surface. I averted my eyes. They felt intrinsically wrong. Symbols of an intrusion I could neither comprehend nor repel. I performed the motions of normalcy, dressing, forcing down coffee, and headed for work. Pausing at the front door, key in hand, I half expected the bell's parting shot. Silence. I locked the door and escaped. Work offered no refuge. My focus fractured, replaying the nocturnal symphony, the spreading plague of circles. Logical explanations withered. A prank. Unlikely. Structural resonance. Implausible. The marks defied reason. My manager, Clara, inquired about my pallor, my vacant stare. Just tired, I mumbled, avoiding her gaze, unwilling to voice the burgeoning paranoia, the fear of sounding unhinged. evening found me adrift, lingering over a solitary dinner, browsing bookstore aisles, delaying the inevitable return. But return I must. Unlocking the front door felt like breaching a siege. Tension coiled in my gut. The house felt watchful, holding its breath. I flooded the rooms with light, scanning for new incursions. Nothing obvious in the hall. Tentatively, I checked the bedroom. The old circles persisted, but no fresh blooms. A fragile tendril of hope unfurled. Then, in the kitchen, reaching for a glass, I heard it. A single, soft chime from the far corner. Not loud, but startling enough to make me jump. The glass slipped, shattering on the linoleum, water exploding outwards. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm. I stared at the corner, empty save for the bin. Trembling hands gathered the larger shards, a towel mopping the spill. I wouldn't approach that corner directly, reaching awkwardly with the damp cloth. That night became another siege. I huddled in the living room, television murmuring, eyes constantly scanning walls, windows. The bell punctuated the silence, near, far, mocking my vigilance. And the circles multiplied. New ones appeared, on the textured fabric of the sofa's back, low near the baseboards, framing the doorways. Always that brownish red signature. Touching one on the upholstery, I felt its coarse texture, like a braided metal. The following morning, I resolved to gather evidence. Phone photos documented the relentless spread. I recorded voice memos, noting times, describing the sounds. I tried capturing the bell itself, holding the phone aloft during its pronouncements, but the microphone rendered only faint, tinny clicks, devoid of the sound's true, bone-jarring resonance. Nothing convincing. I called Maya, asked her to come over, pleaded for company, but commitments held her elsewhere. "Never mind," I said, unwilling to press, unable to articulate the real reason. The bell remained my secret burden. Night descended again. The bell became more insistent, chiming every 20 minutes, then 30, sometimes in rapid succession, then lapsing into unnerving silence for an hour or more. Patterns dissolved, my energy leached away, sanity fraying at the edges. Around 3 in the morning, I found myself standing motionless in the hallway, staring at the ochre stigmata. They marched along both walls, a disordered procession climbing towards the ceiling. I pressed my ear to the cool plaster, hearing only the house's faint internal hum. "Leave me alone," I whispered into the silence, the words feeling futile, absurd. Days blurred into a repeating cycle. The bell, my nocturnal companion, its appearances random, its effect constant. The circles spreading like a disease across my home, sometimes larger, sometimes clustered, always that disturbing hue of decay. A faint metallic tang now permeated the air, subtle but persistent, turning my stomach. Cleaning supplies proved useless. Scrubbing only faded the marks temporarily, only for them to reassert themselves, vivid and mocking, hours later. My own home became alien territory. I manufactured reasons to stay out. Late coffees, aimless drives, long walks through indifferent streets. But the key always turned in the lock eventually. Each homecoming was a fresh ordeal. The held breath, the straining ears, the inevitable wait. Sometimes the bell greeted me immediately. Sometimes it let the silence stretch, amplifying the tension. But it always returned, a relentless reminder of my captive state. Tonight finds me here, in the bedroom, scribbling these words as a bulwark against the encroaching dread. The marks surround me, a constellation of corrosion on walls and ceiling. Lamplight pushes weakly against the shadows. Silence reigns, save for the low, electric thrum. My heart races. Relaxation is a forgotten country. My back aches, shoulders knotted tight. My gaze drifts constantly to the door, anticipating the summons from the hallway. My phone lies beside me, a useless talisman. Who could I call this late? Who would believe? Would they hear the bell? Would the circles reveal themselves to other eyes? Periodically, I rise, stand in the room's center, simply waiting. My legs feel unsteady, palms slick with sweat. I swallow against the persistent lump in my throat. That first night replays endlessly. The confusion, the chase, the chilling discovery of the marks. A muffled chime just now from the living room. My stomach plummets. Ignoring it is impossible. The not knowing is a worse torment. I have to look. I know the futility. Know I'll find nothing tangible. But inaction means sitting here, staring at the door, feeling sweat trace my temple, letting shadows coalesce into imagined horrors. How long can this continue? This slow erosion, this waiting for a revelation that never comes. The pressure behind my eyes is constant, blooming into frequent headaches. Closing my eyes offers no escape. The rust-hued circles burn against the darkness. Alone, the bell finds me. Unpredictable, inescapable. Each time the same involuntary recoil, the surge of cold dread, the clammy sweat. I will stand now. I will walk into the living room. If it rings again, I'll record. Phone charged, video ready. Proof, perhaps only for myself. Confirmation of absence might be its own clue, or it might simply underscore my isolation, trapped with this resonant ghost. Sometimes the sliver of terror imagines turning to finally see it. The bell itself, ancient, corroded, hovering midair. A thought I quickly suppress, chest tightening, breath catching. For now, only movement offers a semblance of control. Keep moving, keep watching, keep waiting for the next ring. The house is utterly still as I walk. My own footsteps echo unnaturally loud. The bell holds its peace, for now, but the anticipatory tension is a physical presence. I glance at the walls, the circles. They seem vibrant tonight, their edges almost glowing. I step forward, phone held ready, and I wait. Waiting for what comes next, a part of me praying it never does, but knowing, with chilling certainty, that it will. It always does, and I will be here, alone, the rusted echo, my only dreadful company. My fingers trembled, slick against the phone's smooth surface as I punched 911. Yet the voice on the other end merely echoed the hollow certainty I already possessed. Disembodied footfalls, untraceable, unprovable, were beyond their jurisdiction. But clarity falters. Perhaps the genesis of this dread warrants explanation. It began 3 weeks prior. Leo, over lukewarm Rubens at our Friday haunt, proposed I watch his newly acquired house during an extended business trip. Just the mail, keep the ferns green, he'd offered, the keys swinging like a hypnotist's pendulum before my eyes. Place is in Briarwood Glen, that new sprawl off Highway 29. Stellar neighborhood. Home theater's yours. Fridge too. Carte blanche. easy surface of his offer. Why Leo, a man notoriously self-sufficient, suddenly required a month-long caretaker should have raised flags. Instead, I envisioned liberation from my own cramped quarters, a temporary immersion in suburban opulence. The allure was potent, immediate. The initial days unfolded in quiet splendor. Leo's residence, a sprawling 3-bedroom ranch, pulsed with the quiet hum of integrated smart technology. Briarwood Glen itself was a monument to tasteful homogeneity. Variations on beige siding, ubiquitous black shutters, the requisite 2-car garage yawning beside each identical facade. Inside, however, hardwood floors gleamed under recessed lighting. Granite countertops reflected the manicured lawn outside, and the centerpiece, an 85-inch television Leo extolled with near-religious fervor, dominated the living room. A rhythm established itself. Remote work fueled by Leo's fiber-optic connection, culinary explorations in his state-of-the-art kitchen, evenings swallowed by the plush embrace of his leather sectional, and the endless scroll of streaming services. The profound quietude was an adjustment, absent the urban clamor of sirens and upstairs tenants. Only the whisper of central air remained. Yet, I adapted. Then arrived the night of Tuesday, October 12th, etched in memory, as I just witnessed the finale of some critically acclaimed horror series. Midnight chimed precisely on my phone screen as the sound registered. Footsteps, emanating from the hallway just beyond the master bedroom door. Not the groans of a settling structure, nor the thermal spasms of plumbing. These were distinct, measured steps. Heel striking floor, then toe. A slow, deliberate cadence amplified by the polished hardwood. My body became stone. Supine in bed, gaze fixed on the closed bedroom door, I listened. Thud. Shuff. Thud. Shuff. Closer. They halted directly outside my sanctuary. Breath lodged in my throat, a painful knot. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat audible in the stillness. 10 seconds stretched into 20, then 30. Silence reclaimed the space. Phone clutched tight, its flashlight beam slicing the dark. I wrenched the door open. The corridor lay vacant, bathed in artificial moonlight filtering through a high window. Every room yielded nothing. Every closet yawned empty. Lights blazed throughout the house. The front door stood sentinel, deadbolt firmly shot. The back door, likewise secure. Windows latched tight. No breach. No plausible entry. Sleep became an impossibility that night. I remained perched on the edge of the bed, lights glaring, eyes darting between the impassive bedroom door and the security app on my phone, which displayed only static images of the tranquil, empty yard. Morning light brought the mundane scrape of refuse bins returning from the curb. Seeking the solace of human presence, I ventured outside. There stood Silas, Leo's adjacent neighbor. Leo's friend, then, he offered, maneuvering his bin with practiced ease. Settling in okay. It's lovely, I managed, striving for nonchalance. Very peaceful. A subtle shift occurred in Silas's expression, a flicker behind the eyes. Mostly peaceful, yes. A pause hung in the crisp air. Look, not trying to spook you, but did Leo happen to mention why the previous folks left in such a hurry? A cold dread uncoiled in my gut. No. What was the story? Didn't last. Nice young couple, the Cartwrights. Bought when the development first opened, maybe last year. Started hearing things, though. Noises at night, footsteps specifically. He'd tear the place apart looking. Never found a soul. 3 months, they were gone. Put it right back on the market. And before them, Silas shook his head, a gesture of weary finality. Cartwrights were the first occupants, though the construction guys told some tall tales during the build. Probably just winding each other up, you know. The urge to confess my own nocturnal experience warred with the absurdity of it in the bright morning sun. I offered a non-committal nod and retreated indoors, the neighbor's words echoing in the manufactured quiet. That evening, I prepared. My phone, propped on a dresser, was set to record video down the length of the hallway. A fine line of talcum powder, gleaned from some forgotten ghost film, traced the threshold. A foolish gesture, perhaps, yet born of a desperate need for validation, proof against encroaching madness. Midnight struck. The footsteps returned, punctual as a phantom train. The familiar, slow tread advanced down the corridor. I commanded my limbs to stillness, though every nerve ending screamed for flight. Again, the steps ceased just outside the door. I counted a full minute this time before investigating. The hallway remained empty. The powder lay pristine, undisturbed. My phone's recording showed only 60 minutes of an empty, silent passage. Yet the auditory memory was undeniable, visceral. This spectral ritual repeated for 5 consecutive nights. Always midnight. Always the same unhurried pace. Always yielding nothing to sight or touch. My sleep schedule inverted. Days blurred into naps. Nights became vigils spent migrating from room to room. A hunter stalking shadows. The 6th night introduced a variation. Ensconced in the living room, feigning interest in the television's glow, while anticipation coiled tight within me, I waited. Midnight arrived, heralded not from the hallway, but the kitchen. I muted the TV. In the abrupt silence, the steps resonated, louder, closer. Rising cautiously, phone flashlight cleaving the gloom, I tracked their progress. From the kitchen, they traversed the dining room, their invisible trajectory aimed squarely at my position. Retreating until my back met the cool plaster of the wall, my free hand scrabbled blindly for the light switch. The footsteps entered the living room. My beam illuminated only empty air where the sound originated. Thud. Shuff. Thud. They halted barely an arm's length away. My fingers found the switch. Light flooded the space, stark and revealing. Nothing. Only Leo's meticulously arranged furniture, undisturbed, mocking my terror. I called Leo then, my voice a thin, reedy thing betraying the tremor that shook my entire frame. I recounted everything. A significant silence stretched across the line after I finished. I should have warned you, he admitted finally, his tone heavy with resignation. I convinced myself. Maybe the Cartwrights were fabricating things, trying to escape the mortgage. Or maybe it was explainable. Old pipes settling, the foundation shifting. Something mundane. You knew about this. The accusation hung sharp and cold. Legally, the realtor had to disclose. History attached to the land itself, apparently. 3 families before this whole development went up, back when it was just fields. Each reported the same phenomenon: midnight footsteps. None stayed longer than a few months. The developers snapped up the parcel cheap, razed whatever stood there before, built this subdivision. My great deal had strings attached. I just assumed it was all... Have you heard them, Leo? Another pause. Longer this time. Once. Vividly. The night before I called you about house sitting. That's the real reason I needed to leave. Fabricated the business urgency. Couldn't face another night alone in there. Logic dictated I pack immediately. Seek refuge in a sterile motel room, or even my own familiar, noisy apartment. Yet, something anchored me there. Obstinance, perhaps. A morbid curiosity. Or maybe a refusal to concede defeat, to flee from an enemy I couldn't even perceive. In the ensuing nights, the presence grew bolder. The footsteps commenced their nightly patrol from disparate points within the house, yet invariably, they located me, sometimes pausing intimately close to where I sat, rigid with apprehension. Other times circling me, an invisible perimeter tightening. On one occasion, they shadowed me relentlessly from room to room for what felt like an eternity. Salt lines, religious icons, smudging sage, sophisticated motion detectors. Every countermeasure proved utterly futile. Last night shattered my remaining resolve. I stood in the kitchen, assembling a late-night sandwich, a deliberate act of defiance against the encroaching midnight hour. The footsteps began prematurely, 11:45 p.m. But this time, they were not solitary. A door creaked open upstairs, then another, and another. A multitude of steps now descending the staircase, fanning out across the ground floor. The sandwich knife slipped from my grasp, its clatter swallowed by the growing cacophony converging on the kitchen. They surrounded me, an unseen legion treading Leo's expensive hardwood, their phantom weight pressing in from all sides. That's when I dialed 911. The dispatcher, professional yet audibly unconvinced, offered a patrol car check. Estimated arrival, 30 minutes minimum. I disconnected. The footsteps pressed closer still, their circle constricting. The air temperature plummeted, my breath plumed visibly. A crushing weight settled on my chest, an external pressure from invisible sources. I bolted, charging blindly through the epicenter of the sound, feeling distinct pockets of unnatural cold as I passed through them, bursting out the front door and into the sanctuary of my car. I drove until I found the fluorescent refuge of a 24-hour diner, and I have not looked back. This morning, I informed Leo I was finished. He expressed understanding, relief even, mentioning he'd contact a realtor upon his return. And the next buyer, I had to ask. Full disclosure, he sighed. Someone will bite, though. Someone always does. They hear the history, think they're different, think they can rationalize it away, just like we did. And the steps, they just keep walking. Searching. I write this now from my apartment. Midnight approaches. The familiar thumps and scrapes from my upstairs neighbors echo through the ceiling. Sounds I once cursed, now strangely comforting. At least these footsteps have visible origins. Research unearthed fragments about the land beneath Briarwood Glen. Before the farms, before the subdivisions, it was a convergence point, a crossroads where three ancient trails met. Travelers journeying west often camped there. Local lore whispers that some never completed their passage. Perhaps that's it. Restless spirits forever pacing, seeking a path long since obliterated by progress. Or perhaps they seek something else entirely, something lost or stolen or buried beneath the manicured lawns and granite countertops. I cannot know. I only know that somewhere in Briarwood Glen, within a beautiful, modern house, invisible feet tread the empty halls. And soon, very soon, someone else will hear their lonely rhythm.